2022, of course, ran against Governor DeWine for the governor's race. But we're here to talk about Ohio. We're here to talk about Ohio politics. We're here to talk about Ohio, its growth, its many things related to Ohio. So sometimes not politics, but also the growth of Ohio and the direction of Ohio. But I want to welcome a good friend of mine, Senator George Lang. George Lang is currently serving his first term in the Ohio Senate, representing the 4th Senate District, which covers most of Butler County. He previously served 2 terms in Ohio House of Representatives. George is an Ohio businessman in Southwest Ohio, and his companies have created over 100 jobs in his region. George, I want to thank you for coming on and talking about Ohio politics, and some things you've been doing in the Ohio legislature.
Thanks, Jim. Great to be here with you. And you actually helped me form my business first philosophy when I first met you about 10 or 12 years ago. And I am proud to tell you that's all I work on today.
I remember you telling me that, and I appreciate that. I mean, look, we got to change Ohio. We got to make it more business friendly. And I know you're leading that charge, and that's great. But we got a bunch of other things going on. I want to first talk to you about Ohio Secretary of State Frank LaRose has asked the legislature to create a law eliminating ballot drop boxes at Board of Elections. Now, it's an interesting request because I think it was also one of the things that was added a few years back. So let's talk about that. Tell me a little bit of the background on it, what your thoughts are, and I do think it was just added a few years back, but maybe you can correct me on that.
Yeah, I don't have any history on that or background, but in general, the sanctity and the security of our elections has to be tantamount to everything that we do. When you run for office, Jim, when I run for office, we have to know that everything is going to be treated fairly, and I believe we have to err on the side of security over the side of convenience. So, I support the Secretary's efforts to make it more difficult to cheat, if you will. I support voter IDs. I support limiting the amount of drop boxes. Anything we can do to make it more difficult to cheat.
Well, I think election integrity is so important, and it's always going to be an issue for citizens. So it's good to know that the legislators looking at that. Of course, I appreciate you all passing the voter ID law over the past year. That was also something that we definitely needed. So thank you for that. Let's switch gears to jobs, though. Although we've got this election coming up, we got to look at what's going on in our state. Ohio jobs numbers. The BLS has put out new numbers showing Ohio's unemployment is up 1 point since January to 4.5%. And we are losing jobs by the thousands in the trades and manufacturing. I also have said one of the biggest issues in Ohio is we really aren't growing jobs, even though some elected officials will say we are. We lost a tremendous amount of jobs in 2020 during COVID, and we've picked those back up. But if you really look, 2004, we have the same amount of private sector jobs, a little more private sector jobs, but not much, than we had in 2004. So 20 years later, we don't seem to be growing jobs to the point that we need to be to sustain a vibrant economy. What are some of your thoughts there on the trend in Ohio, especially this most recent trend where we've lost thousands of jobs in the trades and manufacturing?
The trend in Ohio should be alarming to every single Ohioan. And it's a little worse than you said, Jim. You went back to 2004. But if you go back to 1970, I'll share some statistics with you. In 1970, Ohio was rocking and rolling. Not only was the music a lot better back in 1970 than it is today, but we as a state, we're making consumer goods, cash registers, automobiles, tires. We are the economic epicenter of America. In 1970, the average Ohioan made 10% more than the average American. In 1970, Ohio was the 12th largest economy in the world, and in 1970, Ohio had 24 congressmen. Fast forward to some recent times. About 7 years ago, the average Ohioan went from making 10% more than the average American to 12% less than the average American. Last year, we made a slightly more, maybe a half a percent more than the average American. But 2 years ago, Ohio went from the 12th largest economy in the world to the 24th. We're still slightly larger than Morocco, but Jim, we're a shadow of what we used to be. And Ohio went from 24 congressmen down to 15. No other state in America lost a higher percentage of congressional representation than Ohio. Now, New York and Pennsylvania lost a higher raw number, but nobody lost a higher number. And you have to ask yourself the question, what happened? I can tell you what happened. It was government. In 1971, we put in the income tax, not just on individuals, profits of corporations, one tax after another, one regulation after another. And for 50 years, we've been driving businesses away, and people are going where the jobs are, and that's where the businesses are going. And they're going to those states with the lower taxes, with the lower regulatory, more friendlier regulatory environments, states like Florida, Tennessee, Utah, Wyoming, Texas. These are the states that are financially dominating the rest of the country. And if you look what we've done in the last 10 years, we've started to reduce regulations, we've started to lower taxes, and big businesses are slowly coming back. And I say slowly, as you pointed out, we're only now back to the 2004 level. But the one thing I'm real excited about, Jim, are startups. Ohio is the #1 state in America to start a business. In the last 5 years, over 960,000 startups in Ohio, more than the previous 25 years combined, and we're not slowing down. This year, we're on pace to add about 300,000 new businesses. Now, these are small startup companies, but why is that? Jim, about 8 or 9 years ago, we put in the business income deduction that says for pass-through entities, your first $250,000 worth of revenue is tax-free. After that, you're capped at a max of 3%. When it wasn't too long ago, the highest tax rate was 9.5%. And you see what happens. And in my recent amendment in the last budget, we eliminated the cat tax on 92% of businesses in Ohio, all small businesses. So we're going to put fuel on this fire that is small business startups. Yeah, we need to bring those big companies back, those big manufacturing companies back, but we've got the small businesses rocking and rolling in Ohio.
It's good to hear, and I'm glad we got rid of the cat tax. That was the most egregious tax ever put on a company, where you're putting a tax. A company could be losing millions and millions of dollars, and they're still paying taxes on the top end revenue, not the net income. It was just a horrible tax. So,
Agree.
but let's talk about the big businesses. I mean, look, Ohio has spent a lot of money and already given a lot of money toward Intel, the Intel project. I have read reports now that Intel is being pushed back to 2027, 2028. I've also read reports that Intel is slowing down so much that they could actually do what they were going to do in Ohio and Arizona, which means, at some point in time, they may make the decision not to come here. And people say, oh, Renacci, wait a minute, they've spent way too much. Well, they spent a lot of money, but they've gotten a lot of money from the state of Ohio, so that their net loss walking away may not be as bad as people think. So what are your thoughts on Intel? What's going on there? And tell us what you think is going to happen.
I've not heard much about the delays that are going on, but I think Intel, the future of Intel in Ohio looks really good. Let me tell you why, Jim. There are 4 things you need to succeed in advanced manufacturing today and moving into the future. And I think Ohio is better positioned than just about any other state in America. Those 4 things are a business-friendly environment. We've got a long way to go. We made tremendous strides in the last 10 years, but it takes a long time to turn this big ship. And we're moving toward a business friendly environment quicker than any other state in America right now, except Arizona. Now, there's 7 or 8 states that are already there, and those are the states that are dominating the others. The second thing you need is human capital, workforce development. We have the same issues as any other state there. I think we have some slight advantages, but nothing to give us a huge competitive advantage. The other two things that you need, no one can compete with us on if we can get these right for advanced manufacturing. One of the reasons Intel picked Ohio is because of our water. Jim, advanced manufacturing takes water and lots of it. And you know about Ohio's lakes and rivers, but under every county in Ohio runs these valuable aquifers, and that's what's driving a lot of our economic development right now is our water. No other state in America can compete with us on water. Now, Michigan can say they're equal, but nobody is superior. And the fourth thing that you need is cheap, reliable, affordable energy. Jim, Ohio has more natural gas reserves than any other state in America. We have more natural gas reserves than any other country on the planet except Russia, except China, and except the United States as a whole. And if you take Ohio and Pennsylvania out of the mix of America, we have more known reserves than the rest of America combined. Natural gas is clean, it's affordable, it is reliable. So if we can figure out how to unleash our natural gas, I think we are positioned to financially dominate the rest of the country within 2 to 4 decades. Now, we still got to fix our regulatory and our taxing environment, and that's a big lift, and we're moving in the right direction. I've introduced a bill to eliminate the income tax altogether, and it is my hope to get that put into our budget next year and have the governor sign it on July 1st. But if we can get those four things right, we can win. We can dominate. If we get those four things right, Jim, we don't need incentives. Businesses have figured out they can maximize their EBITDA just based on where they relocate. So if we can get those four things right, we have so much to offer businesses without throwing taxpayer dollars at deals. Unfortunately, we're not there yet.
No, and it's one of the reasons I said Intel. I think we threw a tremendous amount of money their way to bring them here. But I want to throw a little bit of a curveball at you. And I just heard this recently that our electric grid is not strong enough in Ohio, and that we are not able to produce electricity necessary to fund some of our growth. I've also heard that they're building these small electrical plants, which I forget what they call them, down around Columbus, especially, to try and grow out there as well. What do you know about that? What's the thoughts there?
When you look at what it takes to run advanced manufacturing, I don't think anybody in the country has a grid that is ready for what is needed in the next 8 to 10 years. I do believe because of our natural gas reserves, if we can unleash those reserves, and we've got some challenges from the federal government in doing that, but if we can unleash those reserves, we're going to be better positioned than any other state in America. One of the things we're looking at right now, Jim, and we don't know if it's doable, LSC is researching it for us. If we can we build generation for intrastate only, not to leave Ohio, that we can avoid all of the federal regulations? We think the answer is yes. We're not positive on that, so we're doing that research now. And if that's the case, if we can get government out of the way, we can build these plants in 3 to 4 years, and we can be ready. But right now, I don't think any state in America is ready for what is needed.
Well, you said something important there. Get government out of the way. I would 100% agree, whether it's federal or state.
I'm focused on natural gas because that's what we have now that is cheap, affordable, reliable. But the energy grid of the future, we have to look at everything. Today, solar and wind isn't ready for prime time, but maybe with technological advances in 10 to 15 years, it will be. So for us to say, hey, solar and wind is not a viable option, it may be, and we have to open our mind to nuclear, uh, hydro, all of the above is the answer to our energy grid. And if we don't get that right, we're not going to win.
100% agree. 100%
Yeah.
agree. Hey, George, when the state Senate gets back this fall, what can we expect? What are some of the things we can expect to come out of the Senate? You're the chair of the Small Business Committee. Anything going in there? But what can we look forward to when you get back, at least to finish out this year?
Jim, I'm almost embarrassed to tell you that it took me 6 years of being up there before I realized how bad the deep state in Ohio is. I'll give you an example, and I won't name the department, but I was talking to I'll tell you, the Department of Taxation, talking to them about a amendment that I got put into the budget bill, and they literally have said we're not going to honor the amendment. We had to
Wow.
redo the whole thing, and I could give you multiple departments and bureaucrats that I have talked to. And if you think the legislators are in charge, it's just like Washington, D.C. As of right now, we are not. It is these unelectable bureaucrats that are unaccountable to anybody. You can't fire them. You can fire me as your state rep or your state senator. You can fire your elected officials, but you can't fire these bureaucrats. So we have been talking in our caucus in the Senate about what can we do to rein in the bureaucracy in Ohio. We've got some really good ideas. It's my hope that we do something and we have something figured out that we can put into next year's budget. I think we also have to find some property tax relief for these property owners. As we continue to lower taxes and eliminate the income tax, every single state has four primary taxing schemes available to them. Ohio is one of the handful of states that utilizes all four schemes. So it's not just property taxes we have to address. Income taxes. We have to address property taxes and the other taxes in Ohio as well. And here's a statistic that should startle every business owner. Ohio has over 6,000 individual taxing jurisdictions, more than any other state. Think about that, Jim. We're worse than California, worse than New York, worse than New Jersey, worse than Illinois. And the cost and complexity associated with the business guy dealing with all those taxes, even though they don't pay for them, their employees do, they're still stuck with the complexity of managing it. So I think you're going to see us look at how do we not only eliminate the income tax, but how do we mitigate the overall impact of taxes on businesses, and how do we rein in the deep state? I think those are going to be some priorities.
One thing you're talking about eliminating the income tax, and I do applaud that. I think it has to be done. But the one problem, and again, I had a model and a plan when I was looking at the state and some things that needed to be done. What I learned was it's very difficult to eliminate the income tax if we don't get spending down. You have to get spending down to an area that is workable and reasonable. And we know that Ohio spends almost as much as Florida in some cases, but Florida is twice our size. So what are we going to do about spending? What are we looking at? And I realize that you guys also have a lot of work to do because you spent so much through the COVID years. My understanding is there's got to be a lot of significant cuts just to get things in balance again.
Without question, that is going to be key to Ohio's success. Here's a few statistics to reinforce what you just said. You mentioned Florida. These numbers are about a year old now, but Florida has 86% higher population, but only a 14% overall higher budget. So think about that. Our tax per capita is significantly higher than Florida's because they keep their spending down. 50 years ago, when Ohio was rocking and rolling in 1970, the cost of state government was 4.8% of Ohio GDP. I define GDP, the business community, as our funding source. Not quite 100% accurate, but it's about 98 to 99% accurate. If you fast forward to 2020, the cost of state government had grown from 4.8% of GDP to 13% of GDP. So think about that, Jim. In 50 years, our GDP had grown at about 1,800%, while government spending grew at 5,330%.
Wow.
We are outgrowing our funding source by 3 to 1, and it is unsustainable. I can tell you, Rob McCulley, who will be the next president of the Senate, is very, very, very committed not only to reducing the taxes, but to starting to eliminate spending. How many state parks do we need? We have to look at everything. Since COVID has ended, I believe we've removed about 300,000 people off of Medicaid. And to me, that's a good start. That's a good start. If you are able minded and able bodied, you should not be living off the government. You should be out there working. And as you talked about the unemployment numbers, there's plenty of jobs available in America, in Ohio today, for anybody that wants a job.
You touched on Medicaid. I think Medicaid represents about 50% of the state budget as well. Is that something that's going to be looked at eventually? Because if you're going to cut spending and get it down to reasonable levels, you got to really look at Medicaid and how much is being spent in that area.
Not just Medicaid, Jim, but there's 3 huge buckets when it comes to state government: the cost to medicate, the cost to educate, and the cost to incarcerate. And as we move forward to make Ohio more business friendly, I think we're going to see what's going on in Florida. 2 of those numbers are going to go down significantly. One is the cost to medicate. Obviously, if you've got a high paying job with benefits, the odds of you living off the government dole will go down dramatically. And I also think, like Florida, we're going to see a huge reduction in the cost to incarcerate. Idle hands are the devil's playground should kind of explain what I'm talking about there. But I think in general, we need to stop locking up people that we're really pissed off at and only lock up those people that scare us. I think in general, there's always exceptions. Jail should be reserved for the violent offenders. Here's one more statistic on that. Now, these numbers go back to before COVID, but I'm sure they're going to be similar. And the reason I'm going back that far, I was chair of the Criminal Justice Committee at the time. But America, 4% of the world's population, but we're 25% of the world's incarcerated. Do you really think Ohioans are worse? I mean, Americans are worse than the rest of the world? I think we're better. We had more people locked up in America than all of the European unions combined. More people locked up in America than they had in communist China, where their population is 1.3 billion compared to our 320 or 350 million at the time. And at the time, Ohio was the 4th highest state in the nation in terms of percentage of population incarcerated. So I want to see us have amazing jobs, help people that are getting out of jail to get trained to take these jobs. And the average cost to incarcerate someone in Ohio is roughly $50,000 a year. But Jim, that's not looking at the whole picture. That's just looking at the hard dollars to incarcerate. But if you are incarcerated, the odds that your family is on Medicaid, the odds that your family is getting food stamps, all these other benefits, I think the real cost to incarcerate someone is closer to $100,000 to $150,000 a year. So if we can free up private entrepreneurship to be the main driver in the state, our cost to medicate, our cost to incarcerate are going to go down significantly. Unfortunately, I don't think we can at this point address the cost to educate. We can figure out how to make sure we're getting more bang for our dollars, but part of the Business First Caucus agenda is workforce development, so education is going to be critical in that regards.
Well, very good. You got a lot ahead of you. And as I said, there's a lot of challenges facing Ohio. I'm glad to see you're there. I'm glad to see you're heading up the Business First Caucus. And I think you just got to keep doing good work. I did want to switch over to your race. Can you give us a little status on your race in Butler County?
Butler County is Trump country. Butler County will deliver the largest plurality for Trump. But we're not taking it for granted. We're working hard, and we are engaging the voters. But you know, it's very important that everybody has to do everything they can. If you love liberty, if you love freedom, if you love prosperity, not only to get Trump elected, but we've got to focus on Bernie Moreno as well, because you know we've got to make sure when Trump wins that he has both the House and the Senate, because as you know, he's only going to have a 2-year run. In my lifetime, not once when the trifecta existed for the Democrats or the Republicans did it last more than 2 years.
Right.
So we've got to make sure we deliver the Senate as well. And then, Jim, we have to pray that our House up in Washington, D.C. Can get their act together and stop all the infighting and work together for 2 years to really make America, put America on a great path.
Well, that's for sure. And how about your race in particular? How's your race going?
You know, we're feeling good. We're doing polling now, but we're feeling confident. You know, my business first message resonates in Butler County. I tested the concept here as a township trustee, and Butler County is a county. You know, we're the only county in the state with absolutely no debt. We have the lowest overall income tax in the state. We have the lowest overall property tax in the state. And we have the very lowest, there's 3 or 4 states that are tied with us, sales tax in the state. And Jim, when you keep government small and out of the way, businesses flourish and prosper. The community I live in, Westchester, we haven't had a tax increase in our general fund since the 1990s because we put business first. We have about 65,000 residents, about 4,000 businesses that employ about 70,000 people, and we have no income tax. So when you put business first, everything else works. And my business first message really resonates with the voters in Butler County.
Well, George, I still remember the first time I met you. It was at a cigar event, and we spoke. And you have, again, you've been a great asset to me, but also a great asset to the state, to the House, and to the Senate when you serve. So I appreciate what you're doing. I appreciate your continuing support of that business first agenda. And let's hope we can get through November, move forward, and get some things done for Ohio.
Let's do it, and thanks for all you do as well, Jim. Everybody have a great day.